if you wouldn't say those things to somebody else, why are you saying them to yourself? Because very few of us get out of childhood unscathed. And inside of us somewhere, there's a child version of you that needs to hear, that needs to be protected and cared for and nurtured and loved in the way that they weren't in their youth. And I know for myself, it's far easier for me to stand up for my truth than it is to stand up for myself, even though it's one and the same thing.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Unleash Your Greatness, and today I'm excited to have an amazing guest speaker on. Her name is Jessie Shedden. She is the author of Tomorrow's Not Promised, and she has this amazing story, and I'm going to let her tell it because I know I'm not going to do it justice because I only know a small fraction of it, but I'm so intrigued by or excited to hear about the story and the things that she's gone through and the message that she has to share that she's sharing all around the world. So Jessie, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me, Adam. It's a real pleasure to be here.
So you have this amazing story, and in the book, I'm sure it goes into all the detail of what happened, of escaping from this religious cult. And how old were you when that all, I guess, where do you want to start? What's the kind of the starting point? Where's the gripper of the story?
That's a really good question because there's all kinds of levels in it. So 3 years ago, 11th of December 2017, it was D-Day. It felt like a rebirth. It was my escape day, and the day that actually came earlier than it should have done, but it was the most liberating, exhilarating, and terrifying thing I've ever done. And in terms of terrifying, hopefully never that will be surpassed. But yes, escaping from a cult that you've grown up in for 30 years and suffered emotional abuse and coercive control for pretty much all of that time.
Wow.
It leaves you in a really big void on the other side. It's incredibly freeing, but now you're in a vacuum. And to give that some kind of perspective, the kind of things that we weren't allowed were relationships and friendships with anybody outside of it. Going to pubs, clubs, restaurants, going to any sporting events, for women wearing trousers, jeans, pants, makeup, jewelry, no piercings allowed, no cutting of hair, and then no going to university, and also we had no TVs and radio. And so you've just left behind everything you ever knew, but you got no friends on the other side either.
Yeah.
And very little access to IT. So although I had rented a place to move into, which was the first time I'd moved out of the family home, I'd been living amongst people all of that time, as in literally with my family, but now I'm in a silent house on my own for the very first time. And I have no TV, I have no radio. I'm not really aware of things like Spotify yet. I have a small understanding of YouTube. I have recently purchased a phone that has full open internet access on it. And I'm still finding out. I have no idea how to put in a TV. I've no subscription to Netflix. And it's the 11th of December. Everybody else around me is preparing for Christmas and happy times with family. And I'm trying to figure which way is up in a world I barely know.
And you're by yourself. Like, you have no one really. And because did you escape by yourself then? So none of your rest of your family came with you.
No.
Okay. And was this in a compound or was it kind of more you just had kind of a community that you were all together, or how did that work?
No, not a compound. There's like much like any other church organization, like you live in your own properties throughout the local area, um, but you never socialize with anybody outside of it.
Gotcha.
So there were literally only three people I knew, and they were like service providers, like my dentist, my osteopath, and there were a couple of people who were on the council. And you kind of can't really expect them to give you friendship when they're a service provider.
Yeah. And so that I didn't realize that it was not that long ago. It was just a little over 3 years ago, from what you're saying. Like this is not like I escaped when I was 12 years old or when I was 14 or 18. Like you literally are still in the thick of it. Like yes, you've gotten out. Yes, you've started a life, but 3 years ago is not that long. Like 3 years ago, I was like nothing for me personally. Like I mean, that goes in a blink of an eye when you get to my age. So, um, like this is brand new still. Like you're still probably navigating not only away from that culture that you grew up in with all the abuse and the strictness and all that, but you're trying to navigate a world that you're not familiar with, probably to a point, right?
Very much so. So for the first couple of years, I didn't. Although I started to grow my social circles, I didn't want anyone to know my past. I didn't even want to look at it myself. One of the agreements I'd come to with myself before I left was I could either make this all about the pain and what happened in the past and sit in that victimhood, or I could decide that I was going to make the most of the life I had left. And I'd heard that other people who had left had just become bitter and twisted. And I was like, well, that's not really where I want to go with this. The whole reason I'm leaving is because I don't want to ever know anything about this again. And I never want to look at it. And I just want a happy life where I can do whatever the fuck I want. Excuse my language. And it was just, that was my choice for 2 years. It was like I'm just going to put it in a box. I'm never going to look at it. I'm not going to talk about it. No one's going to know. And so a lot of my friends, they're people I was starting to get to know, had
Yeah.
no idea, nothing at all. And it was a rough 2 years. And you say it feels like it was hardly any time for you. For me, it's been like forever. Um, Although the cavity before that feels very very big as well. But it was really rough. I again, we had no sex education, and with no TV and no public displays of affection around me either, there's just no understanding of intimacy at all. Unfortunately, I've been sexually abused at the age of 16. That wasn't seen for what it was, seen as being all my fault, and you're hauled before priests and made to go into intricate detail, which was only more trauma, re-traumatizing. But I get out, and because I've surrendered my whole identity for 8 years as a coping mechanism in terms of not bringing extra suffering on myself,
Yeah.
I'm now I'm not I'm in a really strong is not the right word, people pleasing mode. All I want to do is have people be nice around me because I've had so much nastiness. It's like I just want to meet with approval wherever I go. And unfortunately, sometimes or often that gets taken advantage of by those who wish to do so. And that led me into some really shitty relationships and friendships for the first couple of years as I started to discover how to stand up for myself and for my truth.
Yeah.
And so those first couple of years, I wasn't even really living, even though I'd actually got my release in that sense.
Right.
I was still just fighting to survive in a world I really didn't know. And it's the only comparison I can really make to that is it's like asking you now to go into the animal kingdom. You've lived beside them, you know what they look like, it's the same world, but you haven't had their freedoms and you haven't had their restrictions.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I imagine it's quite a shift. And so take me through that mindset, I guess, that you go from this, and I don't know how old you were when you left, you know, you were obviously an adult, right? You could leave on your own. Um, but you go from this mindset of, I need to get out of here. Uh, this is not right. And probably, I would imagine there's some, I don't know what you want to call it, brainwashing, if you will, that happened in your youth that, hey, this is how it is. This is how you are supposed to be. And now all of a sudden you're like, no, that's not right. I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to leave. And, then you go into, like you say, the jungle, the world that you don't understand, you don't know. And you're trying to go from a place of victim to a place of what I call hero mindset. I believe there's three kinds of mindsets. There's victim mindset, there's survivor mindset, and then there is hero mindset. And so kind of take me through that process that you had to go through to go from victim to hero mindset, where you're like, hey, I'm in control of my life. I'm in control of who I am and what I want to become in the future.
I think in terms of the process, it was that realization that, okay, I'm up to my ears now. Because before I actually escaped, the build up to that was this realization that, unfortunately, I had a couple of people around me who passed away really suddenly, and then my mother was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 66, and it was like, we never planned for any of that. You don't plan for cancer, but we certainly didn't plan for her passing away before my father. It was meant to happen the other way around. And it was just like, you're really unhappy in your life, and you don't know how long you've got, which is why tomorrow is not promised. And it was like, well,
Yep.
then I have to do something pretty fast. Which was only compounded by the fact I was her primary carer, which then made it feel incredibly selfish to walk away from all of that. But it was that I'm at a point now where I'm looking at suicide or a chance at another life, because I don't have options left. I'm because of the restrictions that were on the women in the cult. It was like, I'm not allowed to move out of the house unless I'm married. I don't like the options that are available for marriage, and nobody's really coming forward for it anyway. I'm not allowed to own a business, and that's what I wanted to do. If I did get married, I would have to have children, and I didn't feel that was my calling. And I'm looking at this, and there's just nothing in the future for me. And it's like, well, then it's suicide or a chance at something else. And it's like, well, I have to take the chance. And then I started reaching out, talking to a counselor, and I started getting that help. And definitely through, I remember my counsellor saying, at the time, there was somebody on the outside that I'd had a relationship with previously. Shouldn't have done, got into trouble for it. But it was back when I was 18 and I'd looked at leaving then. It was like, I can't do it. If we don't make it together, where am I? And so that's why I didn't do anything at the time. And then it was like, well, I started putting all of my faith and hope in this other guy on the outside. And I knew there was a massive chance that we wouldn't work out. And I remember my counselor walking me through this exercise where he was like, okay, we need to separate hope from him. And it's like, can you see hope outside of him? And that was my first start to my counselor empowering me. And it was like, so I've got this inside of me now. I can do this for myself. And I have never regretted making that decision and taking that whole step entirely on my own, and knowing that it was for myself, regardless of whatever this other guy did. And I'm not with him now. How much stronger I was through doing that alone. And now that was the first step. And then I think through working with the counselor, it was like, okay, there's pieces of the puzzle here I've had no training for. I have to get an understanding of these pieces. And then I started taking workshops and seeing how terribly comfortable victimhood is, and yet how completely unhelpful.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, and I don't want you to ruin the book for those who want to get a copy and read it, but I imagine the time where you actually leave the cult, you were probably shunned. You were probably, I don't know what the process is in that. I know that I live over here in the United States. You're in England. You're in UK. Um, but here in the U.S., I live in Utah, and there are a few religious cults that are around here, and those people are very, very closed, tight knit. You try to leave, like it's a pretty big deal. Usually, you're disowned. You're not allowed to come and visit your family. You're not allowed to do anything again. And I would imagine that was, and again, I don't know what the situation was with this particular cult that you were leaving, but I imagine there were similar circumstances and how difficult that must have been. Not only that, because you knew you needed to leave, but that you were leaving everything you knew behind and everybody you knew behind, and that you
Yeah,
probably wouldn't have any more contact with them. Like they were probably
yeah,
forbade to
totally.
yeah.
I think the hardest part of that was prior to the decision. For me personally, it was prior to the decision. It was like when I started seeing my counselor, I was like, I've got this problem, I don't know what to do. And he made me address the question that was in the room that I would not look at, which is, I really wanted to leave.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't want to admit that because then I have to look at the pain of leaving all of this. But once I'd made that decision, it's like, okay, this is a club. You play by club rules and you're in or you don't and you're out. And I had to just objectify it and take the emotion side out of it and go, okay, that's the situation. Absolutely, it hurt. Undoubtedly, yes. I don't have access to my family. I've got nieces and nephews growing up and being born that I know nothing about. And that's been really, really painful. And then when I released the book, I was put under some pressure not to release it. And I lost more contact again then. But
Yeah.
I was under no delusion that that was going to happen. So I couldn't. But I think also I'm only 3 years out, as you say.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it's going to feel like in 25 years' time when all my nieces and nephews have grown up, got married, had children, and I know nothing about any of that. Or when, a member of the family passes away and I'm not told, and if I am told, or I'm not told until months have gone by. I haven't been through all of that, and I know other people that have. I'm also incredibly grateful that I didn't have to leave a wife or a husband and children, because that would have been so much harder. And some of my friends have done that.
Wow. Yeah, that perspective of leaving everything behind, everyone you know, everyone you love, and starting a new life. And so here you are, you're 3 years, a little over 3 years into your journey, your new life. You've written a book. You've decided you want to help people with you know, overcome their adversities. What does that look like to you? Why did you I mean, obviously there's a passion there, and I'm sure you feel a calling to help people who have dealt with similar things or are dealing with any kind of hard circumstance. But what does that look like to you, and why did you pick that occupation to help other people,
I think,
specifically women? Right, you specific the excuse me, you specifically strive to help women find their beauty, their, you can describe it better than me, but yeah.
yeah. So I think just to touch on what you were saying before, although you lose a lot in losing your family, can also work for a lot of positive good. So now I know that anything I decide to do or choose to do, I don't have to give many fucks, because I'm not going to have the, oh, we don't agree with that, or you're an embarrassment, or any of that, because I've just got white noise there, as it were. There's nothing going, I don't have to take any of that into consideration. I can do entirely what feels right for me, knowing that I'm not going to be shamed or have any peer pressure at all from family in that sense, which is incredibly liberating, because you can experiment in the world and you can try things and make mistakes, or as I like to call them, life lessons, and learn from them and move on. And you don't have to attach any emotion to any of that, because you're untethered in that sense. You're not tied to all of this, which I see a lot of people, and particularly women around me, getting inside their heads over it. They're so worried about what people are going to think, particularly in their own family, that they stop themselves from taking steps that actually they would probably meet with a lot of praise and gratitude and astonishment from those around them in a positive way of what they've been prepared to do. a lot of what I would have feared, and probably in my case, my family wouldn't agree with, for every one member of my family that wouldn't agree with it, it's probably a 10 out there that are amazed by what I've chosen to do. And not just in escaping, but since then as well. And it's like, well, why are we putting these pressures on ourselves to not do things, to play small because we're worried about people around us, instead of actually stepping up and into our greatness
Yeah.
and releasing the talent that's inside us?
Yeah. So I love how you put that. And I want to, I guess this thought come to my mind is so many times people get stuck in their own thoughts of what other people are going to think, what are people going to say, what are, all these negative things we tell ourselves, right? You basically said, I'm leaving because I have no life here. And a lot of those negative thoughts were almost external. I mean, obviously you still have your internal, thoughts and stuff like that. But once you left, all that negativity, I guess to me, I would think, I'm trying to figure out how to put this into words, uh, that it was almost a blessing in a way because all that negativity and those things, those limiting beliefs were externally forced upon you. And once you left, you're like, I'm free. I can do whatever I want. And if people can tap into that freedom in their self, regardless of their situation, you know, um, that's power. Like that really is being able to unleash that greatness within yourself. And so I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? I'm trying to internalize like how that process worked for you. Because yeah, like it sounds like to me, you're like all the negativity, all the things that were telling me I can't are gone out of my life now. And now there's no reason why I can't. Right.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's like, see, so you got, when I escaped, you got to imagine I'm teleported back in time a little bit because I've never had the chance to be rebellious or to try out a myriad of things that everybody else takes for granted. So I have that, and each of us that's escaped has gone through the same thing. You go through this really rebellious period and you just do whatever the heck you want, and often make a number of decisions that aren't particularly wise or sensible, and you wonder how you ended up alive on the other side. And you get to do all of that without anybody actually shaming you,
Mm.
which, so I went through, I broke, yeah, I just kept stepping out of my comfort zone over and over and over again. I had to, I was forced to. And it was the most liberating thing, as you said, when you just clear all of that out. And much as I would love to have some contact with my family, I'm not, um, I'm not ungrateful for the lack of pressure that comes with not having contact without using too many double negatives.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just now I'm in a situation, and this is something I feel really strongly about, where I choose to be around the people I'm around, and I will not stay in circles that are not healthy for me because I know what that's going to do. And I'm in an incredible. Oh, I couldn't be more happy about having it, that I'm now engaged to somebody who never criticizes anything from the minute that we connected. It was like, all I want to do is support you, and every time I do something to move forward, it's like, I'm so proud of you. There's never, and even we were talking about something the other day, something from the past I felt shame about, and there was just no negative emotion there. All there was support, and it was like, that's the environment
Mm.
that so many of us are looking for,
Right.
a safe space in which to tiptoe out and start to build ourselves up, and build our core strength up. But you don't get that whilst you stay around circles that are really unhealthy for you.
Right. Yeah. Our environment, the people we associate with, they have a huge impact upon us. And kudos to you for getting or recognizing that that environment was not. And I'm sure that most people in that type of situation kind of have an inkling that, hey, maybe this isn't right. But when you've grown up, like you don't no other way of living, like that would be hard. But I think you really did hit the nail on the head when you said that your environment. is so important, and the people that you associate with. So it's amazing that you found this person that you're with now, and that's super supportive of you and helpful in helping you grasp the fact that, hey, that's in the past. You don't need to dwell on it. You don't need to let it stop you from moving forward. I think so many people, myself included, have done that to I know I have to myself, where I'm like, I did this thing in the past and it was dumb, or this thing happened to me and it caused this paradox in my mind, if you will, that I don't think I can get over, or whatever. And we choose to let that go, and we surround ourselves with people that support us, that encourage us, that basically are cheerleaders, saying, hey, you can go do that, you can do whatever you want. Or if you don't have that, become your own cheerleader. Because I think that people wait for someone to be their or to have a cheerleader, and they forget that they can be their own cheerleader as well. So
So I love what you're saying, and it reminds me that when I actually wrote "Tomorrow's Not Promised," I did it in 40 days, and I used a particular program written by Leonie Dawson, who is incredible. And one of the things she said is she learned early on that having an inner critic really wasn't any fun at all until she replaced that with an inner cheerleader. And I just thought,
yeah,
it's brilliant. You can just see it, and it's like so many of us go around with our inner critic sat on our shoulder, yapping away in our ear. And if we can only flick that off and replace it with an inner cheerleader, and I even since having come out now, I'm still constantly assessing. I don't keep people around me for very long if I find that they're either trying to drain too much of my energy or creating a wrong ambience. It's not healthy to me moving forward. And although it might sound very egotistical, I'm the only person that's actually responsible for my own life.
yeah,
So I have to make those decisions as to who's around me and put those boundaries in.
yeah. We have and are the only people responsible for our happiness. If we rely on other people, if we rely on outside things to make us happy, sure, there's things that can come in, there's things that can inspire and help and motivate and cheerleader us on. But at the end of the day, like, we're responsible. It doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter how many amazing things you have happen. It doesn't, there's people who are successful that have, to most people, everything in the world, yet they're not happy because they're not fulfilled. They choose not to be happy. And when we can make that conscious choice to be happy, everything shifts in our life, I think. And
Yeah,
that's the no, go ahead.
happiness is an inside job. It was just I a post I'd done this time last year, and it's an inside job. And if you're not happy, at the time it was I wasn't in a relationship, and it was like, if I'm not happy single, I'm not going to be happy in a relationship. That's all there is to it.
Right. Yeah.
You don't depend on the other person for your happiness.
Yeah. You have to love yourself before anyone else can love you, right? It, it's just how it is. So, what would you say for someone who is struggling with that voice in their head, or that little devil on their shoulder that's telling them you're not good enough, you're not enough, you're dumb, you're stupid, and all these things we tell ourselves? What would be your advice for someone of how to start to get over those thoughts? And I don't think anybody ever fully gets over those little moments of self-doubt, but we can minimize it, right? So what would you tell somebody in that situation? Or you're working with a woman who has all those things. I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm all the things that not just women but everybody tells themselves. What would you tell that woman?
I think for me, the biggest turnaround looking at a situation like that was that what we tell ourselves and what we focus on is what we bring into fruition.
Mm.
So it's kind of counterproductive to be letting that record play.
Yeah, for sure.
So if we can, even though we don't feel like it often, start telling ourselves the opposite of that, we're gonna see the difference. I mean, I'm again going back to relationships, which was the couple of the workshops I did.
Mhm.
Um, I remember them saying, go and write down a list of what you want in a relationship, and I was like, well, I know what I don't want, and I'm like, yeah, that's not quite the point. The point is actually focusing on what you do want.
Yeah.
And yeah, by gum, once I'd written my list, I it was incredible what showed up. Absolutely incredible. And it's just like, why focus on all of the things that we don't want showing up in our lives, because we're just calling them into existence by focusing on them? Seriously not helpful.
True. Yeah, and I think that it's key. Like, and I love what you're saying. If you're like, hey, this is what I don't want, then like you said, just flip it. We have a when I coach somebody who's got all these negative thoughts and everything, I have them do a process that's called the spot and spin. Basically, you spot the negative or the thing that you're focusing on that's negative, and then you spin it something positive. And basically, for every negative thing that you come up with, you need to do two positives to kind of outweigh it. You tell yourself I'm stupid. Then you spin that to I'm smart and I'm worth having love or whatever, right? Like you come up with two positive things to counteract that negative thing. And I think when you can make that shift from the negative to the positive and focus on what you want, then like you say, that's where you start going. Because what we put our time, our thoughts, our energy, our focus into is what we attract. It's what we bring. It's what we uh, create in our life. And so it's
There's
super
a
critical.
there's a aside as well where if you wouldn't say those things to somebody else, why are you saying them to yourself? Because very few of us get out of childhood unscathed. And
Sure.
inside of us somewhere, there's a child version of you that needs to hear, that needs to be protected and cared for and nurtured and loved in the way that they weren't in their youth. And I know for myself, it's far easier for me to stand up for my truth than it is to stand up for myself, even though it's one and the same thing. And it's like, if I can protect that child inside me, it's far easier than telling myself that I'm going to protect myself. It's just, you feel like you're doing it for somebody else. And that, I don't know why, that just seems so much easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's because it's the same thing.
Well, it's always easier to see it in someone else than yourself, right? And it's easier to say to someone else, "Hey, stop doing that," or you need to have more love for yourself than it is. We're our worst own critics, for sure. Uh, I know that when I started doing video or even this podcast, which is still fairly new, I put my headphones on, I listen to myself through the microphone. I'm like, oh, my voice sounds so stupid. And I've had so many people say, you actually got a really good voice. And I'm like, really? I did, I appreciate that. Thank you. It sounds like you're being super kind, but I think they genuinely mean it. And I think we beat ourselves up more than anybody else ever would. And
Yes.
we're
Yeah.
our own worst critic for sure. And why would you tell somebody else? Or why would you tell that to yourself if you wouldn't tell it to somebody else? That's a good
Exactly.
point. It's a good perspective to have for sure. Um, so any other comments on that or thoughts?
No, I don't think so. I think self acceptance has to come pretty early on in the process. I remember when I was seeing my counselor at the time, he was like, well, I want you to look in the mirror and tell yourself you love yourself. I'm like, it ain't never going to happen. Don't be so silly. And a couple of years down the line, I was like, I'm actually able to do this now, and I hadn't realized. But it's that, I wouldn't say getting over yourself, that trivializes it. But after I had escaped, I spent a year in modeling. And I threw myself into that because where I'd come from, I'd always been bullied for my appearance and told that, you're never going to turn anyone's head. And it was like, well, I just want to do this for myself. And as I started doing it for myself, I got a lot of external validation. It's like, well, this feels good. I'm not going to stop that coming because it's healing. It's part of my healing journey. And then it was eventually getting to the point of the bell curve where it was actually becoming quite negative to my journey and detrimental, in some of the requests and things and the people that were showing up through the attention. And it was like, I'd actually at that point had put together events that I was hosting because I wanted anyone to have that experience, and men as well as women, where there's a lot of stereotypical who should model and who shouldn't, and it's like, that's all just complete and utter bull. Anyone can look and feel like $1 million in front of that camera if you get the right team working on them. And that's what I did. I created these events where people could come to the event with absolutely no experience whatsoever, and we would provide them with the hairstylists, makeup artists, and the photographers, and they would go away with that increased sense of self-esteem, which was fantastic. And then I started seeing them being taken down by photographers who didn't have their best at heart at all. And it was like, okay, I need to take a step back, and I want to work inside the body instead of externally, and work with the heads and hearts and get them in the right place
Yeah,
before we start looking, or along with looking, the external validation.
sure. It all starts with from within, like you said. Everything in our company, my wife's and I company, we have a saying that says, "Be better, do better." As you're better on the inside, you do better out in the world and have a greater ripple effect on the outside world. So yeah, it all starts from within. So that's beautiful. And we all want that validation, regardless of who we are, male, female. We all want to be told that, hey, I see you. You're beautiful for who you are. And there's nothing wrong with wanting that validation, but we have to start inside first. We have to love ourselves, like you said.
I think one without the other can come adrift when you're getting a lot of external validation and you don't have the internal
Right.
fortitude.
Sure. Well,
And I was like, I can't set people up for that. I'm actually setting them up for more problems because I know how it feels myself, and it's just not something I can do. I need to take a step back. And so that's how I shifted my focus. And it was like, nah, I have to stop these events. I don't mind putting events together where we talk about the internal, and then we have a photo shoot at the end where, they've got the PAL package, but I'm not going to do it just on the externals.
right. Well, and we see that all the time in movies and stuff like that, especially when you look at young, uh, actors, actresses who get all this validation at such a young age that, oh, you're fantastic, you're amazing, you're just, this massive movie star, and they haven't done the inside work, and then they spiral out of control, right? Like you were talking about. And so we see that in society all the time. And we need to do the inside work. We need to get the head and the heart right before we go looking for external validation, and be comfortable in our own skin, I think, too.
Yes,
For sure.
yes.
um, and love who we are. So um, yeah, amazing perspective to have. So you have another book that you're working on currently, right?
Indeed, yes.
And what is the name of that book, so that people
Make Today Count will be the sequel to Tomorrow's Not Promised. Yeah.
Awesome.
And that will go over the structure of the learning experiences I've had and how people can take a similar route.
Very cool. And when is that? Do you know when kind of time frame that's supposed to be coming out?
It will be out this year. I'm not entirely sure when, but it will be another one of my quick turnarounds, but it will be out this year.
Awesome. So to wrap things up, I always like to ask a question, and that is, if you were to say, if there was one to maybe three things that you would recommend that someone needs to unleash the greatness within themselves, what would those points be?
I think probably my first one would be to, how do I put this? To wean off the addiction of victimhood.
Mm.
because it's a very sweet and sickly feeling that you can have that feels very comfortable, but it actually does nothing for you at all. It's a lovely place to be if you want to be going backwards, and getting out of that and realizing that you have far more in your control than you ever realized
Yeah.
is definitely the first step.
Yep.
For me,
Yep.
it certainly has been. Self acceptance is another one,
Sure.
because if you can't accept yourself, you're gonna have a hard job asking other people to do so. And it comes through subconsciously without realizing so much, and understanding what your passion is. I think for me,
Mm.
because I've had to kind of almost discover my identity all over again because it was suppressed for so long, and then I fell into the hands of people that didn't really have my good at heart. It was like, I know what I want to be more and I can be more, but I don't know what more looks like for me, because it certainly isn't what it looks like for Jane over there or Jack over there.
Yeah.
And it was understanding who I was and being okay with actually being authentic and not going, yeah, but that doesn't look like success. That doesn't look like greatness, because it's different to somebody else that I would hold up as a great person.
Yeah, true. And that's the thing, right? Success is different for everybody. For some people, success is just getting out of bed in the morning. For other people, it's they want, massive amounts of money or a good job or great relationships. So success is relative to the person, but I think you touched on some great key points of what it takes to be successful. And number one is getting out of that victim mindset for sure. Trying to blame everybody for being where you want to be, or it's her fault or his fault or it's the Colts' fault because, and in your case, it was to a point, but you were able to find a way out, right?
Yeah, I like to look at it that I don't feel it's my place to say it's a bad lifestyle. I would say it's not a lifestyle for me.
Right. Gotcha.
And then you can look at it more objectively and just say, you know what, that doesn't work for me.
Mm.
And you move on instead of, and I could spend years tearing it down. And I've seen others that have left and they're 30 years down the line and they're still heavily traumatized. And they're like, I don't know how Jesse's doing that. And it's like, well, because I'm not going to stay in the pain because it's not doing me any good.
Right. Yeah. Not dwelling on that past and looking to the future for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Great perspective. So thank you so much. I want to make sure anybody who wants to connect with you, Jessie, knows how to do that. They obviously can pick up a copy of your book, Tomorrow's Not Promised. Where can they find a copy of that? On Amazon, or where else is you have a website as well? What is that
I,
website?
I do. So you've got the Kindle and the paperback version on Amazon.
Great.
They are very welcome to pop over to my website, jessieshedden.com. If you forward slash it and put book, you can get the first chapter of that for free. You can download on there. You can find me on Facebook under Jessie Shedden, on Instagram under the same. And if you happen to be a female, you're very welcome to pop over and visit the Girl Legends Revealed group on Facebook as well.
Very good. So thank you so much for sharing your, part of your story. The book, I'm sure, goes into much more detail, and I need to go check that out for sure and grab a copy. I love to read, so any inspiring stories I love to grasp onto. So I'm going to be getting myself a copy, checking that out. So thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing the perspective that you have been able to develop through your adversity in life, and you've turned it into a triumph, which is amazing. And I really believe that you've grasped what I call the hero mindset. Even though we have our kryptonite, we have our things that keep us behind, like Superman or Batman or whatever, we can still go out and make a difference in the world. And you are definitely doing that with your message. So thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate it. You being on the show, Jessie, and just keep going and doing the work you're doing because it's needed. So
Thank you, Adam. I certainly will. There's no intentions of stopping right now.
awesome. Thanks again. Any final words before we close up?
No, I think we've rounded it up nicely.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And everybody go check out Jessie Shedden and grab her book, Tomorrow's Not Promised, so that you can read her full story and know what it's like to really overcome some limiting beliefs in your life because other people were forcing them upon you. I think we all can use a little bit more inspiration in that area. So thanks again. And everybody have an amazing time and go and live your best life.